Test 1, 2, 3.
Test. Okay, now we're here. I've got. Let's see. Go ahead and talk, Chuck. Let's make sure we got audio from you. Welcome.
So it's
Oh,
kind of funny because I hear Tim's or I see Tim's mouth moving, but I don't hear him. So we're back to that again.
oh,
I don't know yet right now if we are live. I know we are going to run with
yes.
the opener at 7:01, but we're going to kind of go ahead and just go without the opener temporarily, and then maybe we'll run the opener as our ad. Welcome to Unencrypted. My name is Chuck, and that really quiet guy on the other side of the screen, his name is Tim, and we'll be kind
Actually,
of
I
let you
think they
talk to
can
Tim
hear
just a
me.
little bit. And we kind of want to welcome you to Thursday Night Social if you've never tuned in before. Oh, yeah, you know what? My wife keeps telling me I got to start saying things like, subscribe, smash that bell, or something like that. Like all of those things that we tell people to do to kind of stay tuned in. Oh, wait.
Can you hear
Like,
me?
here she, oh, wait. Now I can hear Tim, and now Cheyenne is calling.
All
So,
right.
hey, Tim, take it away.
Oh, well, thanks for that softball.
I'll send you your
You know,
link in a
I'm
moment.
over here trying to figure out what's wrong with my microphone, and I have no
Yeah,
way to
I
really
have an
look at where
attitude.
you're at here. Let's see. I gotta pull you up so I can see you in front of me. There we go. Now I got like full view. I can see you. You can hear me, right?
I can hear you. Yep.
All right, good. I've got good audio over here, so I think we're ready to get on with this show.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, absolutely. Let's get on with the show. Let's actually run the opener, and we're going to run this opener for 1 minute because we're just trying to get into a routine. And when we come back, we'll tell you all about what's going on Thursday Night Social as we try to make those wise choices to choose the right path in life. So
Okay,
you ready for
you
the
got
opener?
hold on. I'm almost there. Ready?
Okay.
You
So
won't be able
apparently
to
the
hear it, but here we go.
Brother, wake up.
Fellow humans, we ask, can we together deliver peace and healing to heart and mind?
Ulysses reheard the words being replayed.
cut. Soon we will embark on a journey of epic and global proportions. And I don't exactly remember what the rest of that slide says. And for anybody just kind of going, what is going on? So we are Udicci, and this is just kind of the thing we do to try to reach out to the world and say, hey, we'd love to talk to you if you're kind of trying to really figure out what's going on in this world and you kind of want to align with some people that you hope maybe could do some good with and kind of get out of all of the muck. Well, that's kind of what we're trying to do as a group of people, which is right now some friends and some family and some connections and some fictitious characters and a whole bunch of other things that won't make complete sense tonight. But, over time it will, and in time. And we've been doing this for so long that you probably could figure it out before we completely reveal everything. But the big reveal is coming soon. Now, typically, as we do our introductions, like I said, my name is Chuck Lavecchi, and on the other side of the screen is Tim.
This will be
And Tim
me.
is going to jump
Yes.
in here and kind of just wow you.
Well, let's if we're going to talk about fictitious characters, what better fictitious character than Ulysses, right? I mean, it's a stick figure. It's nothing more than a simple representation of a human being, and given a name that's based on some underlying story. So when that chain story really kind of hits out and really starts getting told, that one's gonna be fun. I can't wait to see that one kind of come to life in the gaming environment. And So when we start looking at blockchain and BSV and smart contracts and gaming and gamifying everything, and um, there's going to be some fun things that we're going to be able to accomplish. I think with the work that we are now ready for people to come on and start helping us test.
So, it's interesting because so Janice will be joining us shortly if she's not already in. She'll be coming on, and Janice was on the show with us last time. And then later on tonight, Cheyenne's going to come in the sandbox, and Sierra's going to come, and we're going to have game time. And then we're going to have Mutiny and Bounty with the pirates. And, we say all those things, and people are like, wow, none of this makes sense. And we're trying to say, it really does. And, when we talk about that stick figure who you don't even see on the screen or anything else right now, and, what is a stick figure and why would it matter? And as Tim was saying, it really is just representative of any human. And the idea of beginning with whatever you have available, right? Like early on, we're like, okay, we kind of need that representation of the brand, right? Everybody's got their character out there. I mean, so we kind of had to have this, and Tim came up, he's like, let's do the stick figure, because that's one of those things that anybody could literally begin to build a brand around. Like there's most simple thing, and it kind of represents anybody. And why do we care about all of that? And so we're going to be talking about NFTs tonight a little bit more and what they look like in meta worlds. And that's where those kind of fictitious characters are going to come back into the conversation. Tonight's theme, though, is being on the right path or getting on the right path. And it really is kind of inspired by some personal challenges that we've been going through. And this is kind of a conversation about really trying to come together to work together and building trust and truly allowing people to be who they are and being okay if you find a time that says we can't work together. That's okay. I still value you as a human. Or that says, okay, I'm not quite sure I how to deal with this issue right now. And we're going to talk through that a little bit, because our hope is for well-being in the marketplace as we're helping to develop new economies for future generations. And we get on here and we talk about things that people are going, we're still not able to follow you, and we're saying that's okay, just follow along. Because the journey didn't begin yesterday. It began about 12 years ago, right? The whole idea of actually changing the economic paradigm in the world didn't just begin 12 years ago either, right? We've been actually going through major economic changes throughout all of mankind's history. It just so happens that we're upon perhaps one of the most revolutionary and truly forever changing good for humanity in these current, like these economic systems that we're coming with. So how all of that boils into being a stick figure or anything else, well, that's just kind of for the rest of the show. But we're going to take a quick break, at which time we're going to play our opener again, because this would be where our advertisers would come in, and we don't have advertisers at this point. But when we come back, we're going to kind of talk about healthy challenges and just kind of get Tim prepared, because we didn't get a chance to talk about this. This is really just trying to take a look at like what we're going through in our personal lives and kind of apply it and go, okay, there are times that we reach these positions where, as the saying goes, you're kind of danged if you do and danged if you don't, right? Like you're kind of, it's a no-win situation, but you've kind of like, you got to make a choice. And you kind of know no matter which choice you make, like somebody's going to be offended. Somebody's going to be upset. But the what's behind it is important. So how do you kind of go through that? And as living in a world where we have this thing right now where nobody wants to be offended, well, one thing is just get okay with being offended. Right? That's one thing. But we're going to kind of talk through that, because we want to start talking about how to have healthy relationships as well, as we build a healthy economy. And then later on during Unencrypted, we're actually going to talk about mediation, maps, and models, which is just going to be kind of a fun way of introducing some people to our technology, Udicci's technology, that we're getting ready to release onto the blockchain. And then we are going to have a friend join us, and where I'm going to invite her to answer the question. Let's see here if I can find. Oh,
It does look like she is just now joining.
no, that looks like Cheyenne is joining us. But so my question is this: is something to the fine, and I'll get it exact because I have it written down, which is to ask me whatever questions you need answers to help yourself perform well in the marketplace according to the role you've chosen for yourself. Now that's a loaded kind of question, right? But as we're all trying to figure out how to work in these DAOs, these are distributed autonomous organizations, and where people can actually kind of make their own claim and live up to their own words for themselves and what they believe the value is that they can bring to this new emerging economy. It's very individualistic with a massive team support system around it. It just sort of turns structures as we would normally know it on their head. So we're going to talk a little bit about that throughout the night, and we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back, and we'll just jump into healthy relationships with Tim.
All right.
KYC.
There we go.
Probably. Healthy relation tips. Okay.
Did I get it right?
All right. So
I did it fast. Did I get it right?
Yeah, I was just kind of reading it from over here. I'm like, it's good. So let's just kind of like, and really, Tim, I want to put a lot of this in your lap. And one of the things that sometimes I get accused of is, "Hey, you guys never talk in terms of specifics," and I'm saying because I want to talk in terms of principle of the matter, right? And of course, there are situational conversations that need to be had, but we don't always need to have the specifics of each situation to kind of have those healthy conversations. Um, but basically, we're talking about, in this instance, what is it that we want to do with our talents? What is it we want to do with our knowledge? What is it we want to do with ourselves? And if we say things like create a more prosperous future for future generations, okay, then we need to understand what prosperous means, or but if we say more healthy, okay, what do we mean by healthy? And we kind of have to break down all of those conversations. But healthy in one manner says, allow me to be my best me, and let me help you be your best you, and you help me be my best me. And if there's places we can't agree, well, that doesn't mean full support has to be removed or something like that. But So I just want to kind of put this in your hands, Tim, because you've been going through some stuff, and kind of get your thoughts on what are some of the key things that are necessary when you take on, and we're talking about a DAO, distributed autonomous organization, which is basically people voluntarily enter into an agreement sort of to perform a role for the good of a purpose. And
Right.
what happens in that when it is voluntary, but then starts to become problematic.
Well, there's Chuck. I think going back, how many years? Let's see. So 90, well, it'd be 2000, 2001, right? You talk about healthy relationships, and when we're young, we don't really consider as much about what that means. I think until we get later on in life, and we've had more probably having more relationships in our life and throughout our life definitely kind of allows us to hone our relationship abilities. And I think there are times in our lives where relationships are only temporary, and there are times in our lives where they're long-term relationships. You and I and many people, even our family, and the ones that have been with us for the entirety of our lives. And a healthy relationship, there's so many facets to what is, what makes a healthy relationship. And if you're feeling turmoil or you're feeling like negativity, that in itself can lead to an unhealthy relationship. And so when you talk about wanting to share, you're talking about wanting to help. I think it starts more with encouragement and encouraging each other to be a better version of themselves, or maybe offering insight as to ideas. And not everybody wants help, and not everybody wants help the way we want to offer it. And so you tend to sometimes you'll upset people. So there's an accountability for when you maybe step over a boundary, and you shouldn't have said something. And so there is that accountability that kind of helps to build trust. And so there's a lot of those, I think, those factors that kind of come into play.
I think that it's interesting. Like, one of the things you said early on also is, like, you look at the people who've been with you all your life, your family, and I go back to that, and I'm thinking, there's a lot of trauma that we carry forward from our childhood, right? We kind of know that there's a lot of where in some ways our emotional self, and even our cognitive self, um sort of the trauma sort of sears in sort of a wrong thinking pattern, but it gets strengthened over the years, and it becomes very comfortable. And getting out of those traumatic kind of thought patterns actually requires some more vulnerability, and going back deep to those, like, okay, very traumatic things that happen in our life. Now we talk about that quite a bit in the mental health realm when we talk about that traumatic, that trauma going back. But there's another side to this, and it's those great values. It's those things that, like, your family and your brother and your sister and your mother and your father, or your aunt, your uncle, whoever it was, like, there was something that you picked up that for let's say, the other side of trauma, which was, it was so much a treasure. You made it a part of who you are, and to this day you still believe in these kind of values, and it's what you want to pass on to other generations, because you think that those values are worthy of the efforts to put forth and kind of make it better. So there's some times that we enter into situations where our past kind of informs us, either through great gratitude or perhaps through trauma. And we have to sort of figure out which one it is that we're going to allow to sort of run the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes time in a relationship, you're like, okay, um, I don't necessarily get to choose how that gets ran, and neither do you, right? It's kind of like that. There's that mediated middle. There's that
Right.
piece where we say we recognize there's trauma, but we recognize there's great value, And if I see the value in you, if I truly believe that you mean and intend for good, and you've demonstrated this through X, Y, and Z, then let's walk through this together. But if I feel that, like, we're just not really trying to accomplish the same thing, and that's okay. You want to grow oranges, I want to grow apples, and that's okay, right? I mean,
Right.
we can kind of go our own directions inside of
Well,
there.
you in business, I think that for especially for us, we found that there are those relationships where they come into your life for a period of time. You nurture them, and you learn from them, and you're supported by them and all that type of stuff. But then they kind of fade away, and they were there for a certain reason in your life. I believe that you and I have talked many times. I'm no longer a believer in coincidence, and I think many times God will place certain relationships in our lives at certain times for a certain reason. I think that there are, there. I can point to I can't even count them on both hands how many times I feel as though that type of relationship has been in my life, or I have been that relationship in somebody else's life.
And I think that when we talk about these relationships, and as you say, it's also just in the business world. I mean, it's very often we make relationships be very personal, husband, wife, spot, whatever, right? We That's our first, and probably should be the first thing that comes to mind when we say relationships are those that we hold most dear. But truly, the relationships that extend, that are also dear and also cherished, but are a little bit more arm's length away. How do we bring those into there? And that starts to come into a piece where we start talking about people being able to use their own language and being able to
Right.
speak in their own voice. Now, we know over time that, I can be somewhat sarcastic, just a little bit sarcastic. And I know that that's not helpful. And I can be like everybody else where I can get people really frustrated because I can argue really well, but it doesn't do any good necessarily. But there are times that you have to say, but it was also the only thing I could do to kind of stand up for myself. Right.
Right.
So that's back to where we've got that trauma and good kind of come together. And in all of that, in the idea of what we grew up with what's harmed us versus, and as well as what's really great, we don't want to necessarily lose it simply because some people want to kind of communicate differently. But if we're going after the same values, if we're really trying to accomplish something we truly believe in and we want to accomplish it together, then we sort of have to work through those differences in our conversational styles, right? We can work on the tone, all those other kind of pieces. But if we're
Right.
actually trying to change the economy, we still have to do, and the world, we have to take those kind of things into consideration. And that's where I want to kind of take a step. We're going to go to a quick break. And when we come back, we're actually going to start talking about mediation and what mediation sort of really means and where it goes on, how we go on from here. All right, so we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back.
back.
Okay. And we're back. So, yeah, we're talking about getting a new chair. Because the one that I sit on, which is kind of fun, is I think from like, I don't know, somewhere in the 1940s, 50s, maybe one of the old like GI chairs that they sat on, and they were extraordinarily thankful for having an extraordinarily uncomfortable chair to sit in while their barrack buddies were out in the fight. So this seat is not exactly comfortable, but we did, find something on Marketplace, and we're going to be going over there and hopefully getting a new chair and making it much more comfortable. All right, so let's talk a little bit about mediation. And people, it's like, here's a big jump, but going to that idea of healthy relationships, what we were really just talking about is mediating personal experiences, if you will, mediating your personal life experience, mediating your personal life communication styles, mediating your cultural communication styles, and mediating there. It's kind of that. It's that in between, which says, okay, we've built enough of a trust that figure out that it's worth some effort to put into this relationship for some purpose. Let's not allow just some misunderstandings of misunderstandings of nuance or of tone or of whatever be the thing that comes, between us. Let's actually figure out how to mediate where we see things a little bit differently, or not even see things differently, maybe just say things differently. So, if I were to define mediation, mediation is intervention in a process or relationship. Another word for it's intercession. So it's kind of an interesting thing. And why we're actually coming into having this conversation is this gets to the heart of what our technology is. Our technology is effectively a mediation platform. And for years, we would talk to people about this and they wouldn't quite get it. But now, as we're moving on to blockchain, where you deal with smart contracts, right? One of the obvious things that contracts often require is mediation, right? You have arbitration and mediation. So there's a mediator in facilitating of a contract. And our platform, as we're designing it right now, is to act as a mediator across environment. So whether that is cloud to chain, chain to chain, chain to cloud, cloud to cloud, it's just that you're able to mediate the understanding. You're able to mediate the information across environment back to the individual. So just talking about what we just did there, and hopefully, Janet, if you're listening, like, it was interesting after having her on. She was like, okay, I have so many questions. And that's very often what happens. We have so many questions. And I think tonight's a good example as to why we have so many questions, is because we're literally talking about taking principled activities in actually trying to intentionally create healthy relationships, and now also trying to bring that into a technology and into a world unlike any have really thought about before. And we're going to be talking during Ceox about meta worlds, as to where we are. So all of this it all comes together, but sometimes it's just huge, right? It's huge to kind of pull all of this together. Thankfully, we have Tim over there ready to make it all concise in 3 sentences. I will give him 4 seconds.
Concise and wait, did you say, wait a minute, did you say 3 seconds or 3 sentences?
3 sentences.
Yeah, mediation in 3 sentences. Chuck, we were having a conversation before, and you were saying how, things don't typically, you can't really explain them in less than a page and a half. And, we were talking about how I've been told that I'm too wordy and that I need to refine what I say, and I've been really kind of thinking about that. And so, there's your 3 sentences, mediation.
All right, I guess, like, if I would have chosen maybe 3 sentences, it would have been something like this. Udicci uniquely approaches data unification through a process we call data mediation. Mediation is a method of reconciling information between 2 entities. Within Udicci, entities are called profiles, and we rely on software. Anyway, so I'm cheating because I get to read. But the reason that I'm bringing all of that up is to really now kind of talk about what we're calling maps. Okay. And, what are maps? Well, For years, as we had our Android, our Apple phones, right, we all went out to our app store and we downloaded our apps, and that was it. We had the app, economy, right? That's kind of what we just lived through, was the app economy. And now we're starting to change from the app economy to the DApp economy.
Yes.
DAPP. That's decentralized or distributed, but I'm going to say it's
Distributed, yeah, distributed
decentralized.
applications.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's distributed applications. I call it decentralized. I think they both work. Either way, DApp is simply this: they're applications that run on the blockchain, right? So, okay, so we have a whole new world opening up, because whereas before, when we had apps in the App Store and we made all sorts of money for Google and Apple and a little bit of money for the people who were producing the apps, that whole thing's being flipped on its head, right? There's just a little bit of money for people who created the blockchains, and everybody gets to share in that if they want to actually kind of participate by getting the coins and make that economy go. But the greater amount of opportunity to retain your asset values exists on blockchain. And this, the asset value there is like the information you're putting into your app. And, what do we mean by apps? Well, like one of the things that the first one that we're going to put out in the system is called Generation Keeper. And, Generation Keeper is really just the shoebox kind of, for your family to go in and put some pictures and, tell some stories around it, right? I mean, we've had people go, how is that different than Facebook? And I'm like, well, that's not even what Facebook is. But beyond how is it different than Facebook is that it would actually just be that the family kind of creating these kind of chain stories, right? They'd put some stories together around some media and they'd be able to share it. And it then becomes owned by the families, and it's able to be secured for generations. And in fact, if you want to actually monetize that in any capacity, you could do that. All right, but that's just an example of a DApp that would be built on Udicci's platform, is this Generation Keeper. Another example of a DApp that we'd be putting out there is a brand culture. And it's a brand culture process, and it basically is where you help to define the culture that you want to carry out through your brand, and then also yourself. So, we're going to have this kind of an opportunity for distributed autonomous organizations, the DAOs, to kind of put together the culture or these values that they kind of want to work together on, and some narrative around it, so that they can, okay, this is what we believe and why we're working on it. And then each individual could kind of put their words inside of that. So that would be a little bit different version of how you might use Udicci as a DApp, but we call ours maps. Because DApps do work on the blockchain, but don't always work on the cloud, and those on the cloud don't certainly work on the blockchain. And what we're really coming into is a time when people are going to sort of live in the meta worlds, and we're going to be talking about those, but they're kind of living somewhere between the cloud and the chain. So, if we go back to that Generation Keeper idea, the that's the type of thing that my daughter may have a cloud account, but still wants to be able to access Generation Keeper. And okay, great. And we can still use the blockchain to secure it all. So, you're basically mediating between two environments in that case. And, I'm just trying to close that back up, as we then will kind of move into a model that could be built out of all of this. And I know that this is like moving a million miles an hour, but frankly, this entire market is moving much faster than that. I mean, we are moving extraordinarily quickly.
Yep. No, it right now, the pace of change, I've been, I've just been mesmerized by it, because of the fact that we work with so many different and varying tools to build the platform. Just watching the evolution of the technology in 4 and 5 different areas of technology, including in BSV, and how fast blockchain is moving right now, it's, it is a full-time job just to keep up with every single little segment of this change. So understanding the grand picture and how it's impacting us as a whole, as a society that we don't even understand yet, that's what's baffling my mind.
Let's go with the idea of the society we don't understand yet, and we're going to kind of get into business models we don't understand yet, if you will. We're going to change that here. just to kind of show what a model might look like on top of Udicci. But before we do that, I want to kind of say it's funny, as you just kind of mentioned BSV. I was reading an article today, and I don't remember exactly who it was that kind of said it, but they asked why it was, and I always get his name wrong. Vitalik. How do you say Vitalik's last name, Cheyenne? Okay, so it's Vitalik with a pause. All right, so Vitalik is the founder of Ethereum, right? And there's a lot of speculation that Ethereum is going to be this great kind of Bitcoin killer, but the two will have their place. But Ethereum is going to be the kind of thing out there. And somebody was asking us, like, so why does Vitalik not think, why is he so against BSV? And the answer was because BSV makes Ethereum irrelevant. I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Right. And you start thinking about those kind of things, and that's where we are, is we're all, which one is going to win? The answer, it doesn't matter, as long as we, the people, are the ones guiding this more healthy economic thing in the end. We don't need to decide which chain is best. We just need to be able to mediate across the chains and not allow ever again for our personal data and our personal value to be siphoned from us into big tech, right? It's kind of this. There is no doubt. You take enough time, do enough research, there is no doubt that blockchain is going to transform the world, the economies of the world, the way we do everything. It's not apparently seemingly going to be necessarily too pleasant getting to this change, but it seems on the other side of this change, it's quite substantial and good for mankind. It's going to take some getting there. But the great thing is that we don't have to be beholden to platforms. We can be tied to principles. So those are kind of very different ways that we have to be thinking, and we can support economies based on principles that we support, and then sort of let the best economy win, which is very interesting. Hey, can you see if Janice is on?
Only Cheyenne's still here.
Okay, so Cheyenne is here. Okay.
Yep.
So
we can't hear you, Cheyenne.
I can hear her just fine.
Oh, really? That's funny.
Yeah.
Hold on.
So I'm thinking, if I can hear her, the stream can
Try
hear
talking
her.
again, Cheyenne.
There
you go.
You got it?
Yep.
So it's Vitalik Buterin.
Okay. Vitalik Buterin.
And he's Canadian-Russian.
And this is kind of the interesting thing. All the conspiracy theories in the world, what's going on. Jack Dorsey, right, moving over, stepping down from Twitter, and just going full time into Block, which is very interesting. It's like they're, obviously changing the name from Square to Block, and I think they're changing the name of the work that they were doing to Spiral or something else. Right, we're in the midst of this massive technology rebranding and reorganization. It's kind of wild.
There are go ahead.
No, I just kind of think it's like the titans of technology are trying to take over this whole space as an infant, because we're really at the infant stage.
Absolutely.
The titans of technology. That's kind of a cool way of thinking about it. And
That's what they are.
They are. And what's really kind of interesting, and we're talking about like Vitalik, I actually had listened to, I don't know, some podcast or whatever else, and it was really more a matter of, what do you want to say here? Belief in how technologies should be rolled out, right? So it was kind of, I think the general of some in the BSV market or in the Bitcoin market, probably in the BSV, was you had to get the protocol to a certain point for it to be super viable. Whereas like Vitalik was like, no, that's not how technology works, and followed the Microsoft plan, which was, we'll give you a Windows 9 and a Windows 95, and we'll complete it when XP is retired. Right? It's kind of the same thing that Microsoft used to do, or all of them used to do, is roll out technology that wasn't done, and then they would just rebrand it. Right? I mean, how many times was Windows 95? Like Windows 95 version 15, right? No, Windows 98. Well, it would actually be fun to do a review of the different operating systems now, and all the hype
so
that they.
Just to kind of review from my own personal experience, and I don't know if your office was the same. Chuck and I were both stationed in Gunner Air Force Base, Gunner Annex, and we had a period of time where we went from I think we started out with like the SX computers to the DX, and then there was like 3 or 4 iterations of the DX, and it was like every quarter we were getting a new computer. And it went for 386, and then it was Windows, like all the different versions of Windows all the way up through, and it seemed like we had a new computer every 3 months. Was your experience the same?
Oh yeah, pretty much. I mean,
Okay.
it was like it was your top programmers got the 486s, and then you got the hand-me-down 386s, and then Pentium's on its way.
Seniorities, yep. The seniority of the officers, everybody got those really cool computers. They got to have them upgraded.
So I do think it's an interesting term, though, the titans of technology. I think that that's a very sort of fair. I mean, when you hear people talk about the Bitcoin, they talk about the Bitcoin civil wars. I mean, and we're not apparently, let's just say that it wasn't civil at all, right? Like that there was some things that actually happened offline that are highly questionable, and it does seem to be that the reach of this is global, and it has involved quite a few billionaires, which is just interesting. And like some of the billionaires got behind their kind of favorite token, and and the only way you kind of know which one's going to work is to kind of be a computer scientist yourself, or at least try to get to the people getting back to, like we were talking about, getting to the people that you could trust. And that's where Brian, I'd love to get Brian back on at some point in time here, but I think one of the things that we were very blessed with was your connection to Brian, in part because it was a hometown connection.
Yeah.
Right. It was like you literally had that hometown connection. It's I mean, you guys weren't like best of friends over the past 20 years hanging out all the time.
Nope.
But simply, like, once you were able to reconnect, there was a trust, and then I'm like, okay, Tim's going to trust. We can trust here, and you start to kind of take those steps toward people you can trust, and then you start getting closer to kind of the final source, like the Craig Wrights of the world, or the Satoshi Nakamoto's, one and the same. Who knows? Okay, now we're learning more, and this sounds good, and we're learning more, and this sounds good. But we're never going to really understand the depths of what's going on at these blockchains, nor do we ever want to. But we do need to be able to mediate that again back to the world. But you got to begin by finding those people that you can trust to build with. Right. And I think that that's an important thing, is like really figuring out who can you trust to build with. And I would even say that we're at the point where it's less about skill set and more about character.
Yes.
And, like that we're really, look, there's a lot that we can teach. There's a lot of people ready and willing to teach. And in fact, that's part of the business model, is an entrepreneurial apprentice model. A lot of the answers already exist.
Yep.
And actually, so let me try to find the question that I wanted to ask tonight. And I wrote it down. This was my question that I wanted to, and hopefully if Janice can come on, I wanted to pose this to her. But I'll pose it to Cheyenne, and I'll pose it to Tim, and I'll pose it to myself, and I'll strike a pose. Question was this: ask me whatever questions you believe necessary to well perform your chosen role. I kind of liked that question because I'll tell you what I seem to find as we um, muddle through trying to grow autonomously together is a lot of thought patterns, old ways of thinking that come with um, assumptions which create unnecessary burdens. Where if we could sort of just begin to listen a little bit more as opposed to and direct a little bit less, right? I think in some ways that vulnerability that we talked about that was kind of necessary to really strengthen and restore and create healthy relationships, that vulnerability needs to come back, that maybe I don't know as much as I think I know, and maybe I don't need to doubt what the other person is saying. Maybe all the other questions, maybe there are answers, and maybe I don't need all of the answers. And that's kind of a thing I think for us was like how very challenging this journey into blockchain has been. You're like, there's a lot of questions that need answers. Then suddenly you have to start going, and I'm not going to be able to have all of the answers.
Yeah.
And no matter how much like O'Brien is willing to help us and he's been great, we can't monopolize all of his time, even though we would love to. Right? So there's got to have to be this kind of like, okay, I'm finding the people I can trust. How? I don't know. You get to choose that, right? And then you get to kind of start participating in the process to, developing sort of together through here. But I think when I asked that question, and yeah, I was asking it kind of, I wanted to ask it for, allow Janice to ask that question, which is literally, I mean, because she's talking about wanting to help with the marketing, the outreach. Oh, okay, so that's where that first came from, which is, I can throw a whole bunch of information in anybody's direction, and not a single bit of that information will be absolutely written for that individual alone. Right? But we are literally coming into a world where everybody wants to be talked to and spoken to exactly how they want to hear, as they want to hear, when they want to hear, because they already have preconceived notions. So pretty much all of the content that you have available to help make people kind of get up to speed, unless it's presented in the time and the pattern and the order and that they want to hear it, it kind of the opportunity, the pace gets slowed down unnecessarily. There's just becomes these like, well, I need this answer, and like, okay, here's more information. Now I could stop and reorder it, but we can't necessarily do that if we're a bunch of people unfunded trying to bootstrap a new economy and competing against Apple. Right? So there's kind of that idea that when you're choosing your new role and what you're going to play in this environment, you have to decide also that I'm going to choose the new me. I'm going to choose the me that wants the healthy relationships with the trusted partners that I look to kind of align with. And I'm going to ask the questions I need to ask to understand how we can better play well together. And I'm going to contribute where I can think I can contribute. But if somebody knows a little bit more, you just have to kind of trust that they know a little bit more, because there's no CEO at the top of the game saying you're fired, you're hired. So it's a little bit like we have to be able to make sure that we can take this abundant change of information and this abundant need for trust in this world and to bring healing and sort of just kind of start moving forward together. What happened to the audio?
Oh,
okay.
I don't know.
But anyways, so I kind of thought that, and like I said, once I asked that question, though, I kind of liked it because it did put some personal accountability back on me, which is to say, like, ask the questions that allow me to perform my role well. And if I think in terms of ask me the questions to perform my role well, in other words, the only reason, my only motivation for being in team is so that I can perform my voluntary role well or better for the team, right? Like, how do we actually then sort of improve all of that? So this has been kind of like a journey from, okay, like broken communication, impacts on relationships, through like trying to rebuild global economies, needing to have kind of that willingness to have a mediated heart and a more so a mediated mind. It's almost like we have to just be willing to trust in the heart and have our minds mediated so that we can then come together and more quickly share with those that we choose to trust and partner with. Um, so, yeah, that's been our journey tonight. And also through the introduction of the system. So it's been kind of an interesting conversation. I did wish that Janice would be able to join us. She was hoping to come on. But Tim, what thoughts have you got?
Well, in regards to the question, I guess the there's so many factors inside of that when you're thinking about questions that you would ask to help you perform the role better, and when we're talking about fulfilling the roles that we're fulfilling, I guess I would ask, it depends on what hat I'm wearing in the moment. And so I think that there comes in a certain amount of patience and understanding that has to go into communicating that information back and forth, especially when you're on a team. And I think that when there is a when there are dominant forces inside of an organization, there has to be a way for people who are less likely to speak up to be able to feel comfortable to speak up.
Yeah, it's kind of that whole idea that the first time one person stands up again and says this is wrong, it enables another person to stand up and say this is wrong. And
Yeah.
um, and I'm going to say the other side is, I think, and you hit on it earlier, is the need for encouragement. And I'd say for every time you stand up and say this is wrong, you should be 5 times saying this is right.
Well, and I think right now the easy go-to answer for most anything that happens to us in a relationship is to get aggravated or feel discouraged, or to have this turmoil or this stress, because that's what we're seeing everywhere we turn, and everybody's hurt emotionally because of of having to deal with a pandemic and stuff. We're all kind of going through it together, but taking it out on each other is not a good way to handle it. And quite honestly, we've talked about it before. Is the fact is that's not the way we're called to handle it.
No, it's interesting. We tune into the Canadian prepper on occasion, and he's like no nonsense, which is like, hey, it's time for you to get prepared for what might be ahead, right? And what might be ahead might be quite challenging. And I'm starting to really believe that accountability, when we talk about accountability with one another, it is doing your job, right? And yes, it is doing your job to your best of your ability, but more so, I think it's about keeping the right attitude and actually acting on the beliefs you think are most healthy for you and for others, and like acting on them. And and if you disagree between one another again on what's healthy, well, okay, mediate that, work that out. But once you really find, because humankind, I mean, we actually will naturally cooperate. We are it's innate design to actually want to cooperate. It's only when we're not even getting it. That's another time. Bruce Crowbar will come on. We'll talk about that, because there is an innate desire to cooperate, right? And
Yeah.
it's what gets beat down and through trauma, through all these other things that we talk about with the pirates and whatnot. But yeah,
Yep. So I guess
Shane,
that would
Andy,
be
you have
my
some
ending
thoughts on that?
thoughts. Go
What's
ahead.
that?
So with the particular question, as I listened to you guys with this first segment, it really kind of seems like there's a lot of personal information about relationships that's kind of melding over into your business. And I understand the concept of mediation, so I see why. But I guess with the question specifically, it sounds more like a refining question. And I would think that I would need it would be like me going to my boss and saying, okay, so I know what my job is, right? And so, but how can I do that better? So to me, that's a refining question. But it sounds like you were relating it to someone who maybe doesn't know specifically what their job is.
So yes and no. I think when it comes to the DAOs, the DAOs, right? It's not up to, I mean, yeah, I've got a character called Ceox, or it's like, but I am not the CEO of anything except for me. Like literally, that's where we're at. Is everybody is truly the CEO of themselves, and they get to determine the role that they will perform in the new economy. Right. So now all of a sudden you've got this network of people who are sort of reliant on you. And I'm going to tell you, like, one of the things that really where this was drove home for me yesterday, I ended up out on S-Script site. Right. I was just trying to read some stuff and I was trying to remember something about S-Script, and I got out there and it just sort of hit me that, and what's his name? The gentleman who's the program's S-Script?
Yahweh.
It just sort of hit me. Yahweh's on our team. Like I had to actually step back and for a second, because for the longest time I think about like, well, it's it's only people who are with Udicci that are on our team, and that's not true. Yahweh is actually writing a powerful tool to help us get stronger on the blockchain.
And he's going to help us write contracts utilizing that tool directly. So yeah, not only is he writing the code, he's actually helping us to learn and utilize it in the best possible way.
Right. So here's a guy who we are not paying. Did not
That's not
seek us
true.
out as
That's not true.
Huh?
We did pay him.
Okay. Well, hold on. We are not paying him to develop the tool. Right? No, he's coming on as a consultant. But I'm sorry. Yeah, I should have been more clear. The software that he wrote, the script software, the language itself, he took up on his own with a couple other people. They decided it was their role, because of their strengths that they had in their understanding, to write this tool, which now enables a whole bunch of other people who would seem otherwise as disconnected, decentralized, distributed, autonomous, right? All these other people who are actually on their team as well. Because as we begin to put products out there, more people will come back to the blockchain and begin to, so it's really, truly in every way developing an economy with one another. And it's everybody in that economy choosing to do it together and choosing for themselves the role they will perform. And that's why I say, like, and now ask the questions of whomever you choose to trust, the questions that you need answers to well perform your role.
1 minute to Ceox.
1 minute. And then we are going to be switching to Ceox, and we will be back with Ceox and Cheyenne in the sandbox. Dun, dun, dun.